Welcome back to part 4 of this series, and in this part we're going to get a lot done. We're going to add sound effects and visual effects, we're going to make the arrow finally stick into surfaces, and we're even going to have it push objects that simulate physics. And we're going to make our Crosshair widget dynamic so that it tells us when is the best time to fire the bow through animations and sound effects. So let's get started. Alright, let's start by first adding a sound when we pull the bowstring. I already have a sound for it, so I have a bunch of sounds that we're going to use here. I got all of these sounds from freesound.org, which is a great source for free sounds. And this is the one that we're going to be using. And that is the sound of a bowstring being pulled. And luckily, it's also 1 second, which is exactly the time it takes us to fully draw the bow, so we don't have to play with the duration of that sound. So first thing that I like to do with sounds is create a cue out of them. So you right click and you say create cue here. And I'm going to call it cue underscore arrow draw. The nice thing about cues is that you can play with the sound, you can adjust its pitch, its volume, things like that, make it repeat, play a bunch of different random sounds, things like that. So generally I like to make a cue in case I want to modify it later on. In this case we aren't really going to modify it right now, but who knows. Alright, so now that we have a cue, we want to play this cue. And the right place is the bow itself and not the AC bow mechanics, our actor component. And let me explain why. When we start drawing the bow, this is the function that we call draw begin and draw end, and it handles everything to do with drawing the bow. And we also set the state of the bow here at the end to draw or idle when we're done. Now, instead of doing this here, we're just going to call a function on the bow itself and tell it do your draw begin or do your draw end. And that way the bow can handle what it does when this event is called, including playing a sound. So going over to our BP bow, I'm just going to create 2 events. I don't really need any of these. I'm going to create one custom event for draw begin. I'm just going to name them the same as we have in our AC bow mechanics, and draw end. And draw begin, it just takes the bow state and sets it to draw. And for draw end, it sets it to idle. And this is exactly what we're doing here. So we can just replace this with draw begin, because we have a reference to our bow, so we can call that function. And over here, we already have the bow ref. Just draw end. All right, and now we can start playing the sound in the bow itself. And the reason I'm doing it in the bow is because you can have different bows with different strings, so different sounds. Now there are 2 sound functions you may want to consider. One is play sound at location or 2D, and one is spawn sound, also at location or 2D. The difference is play sound just plays a sound but doesn't give you a reference to it. Spawn actually spawns an actor in the world so that you can destroy it or do things with it. So we're going to do spawn because we might want to destroy it if we stop drawing the bow early. So, and the sound we're going to play, I'm going to make it a variable. Call it the draw sound. And compile, and here I'm going to pick my cue draw arrow. And the location is just going to be the location of the bow, get actor location. And you can do things like the further away, the less the volume is. Some of these things are already by default in the cue, but you can modify them. That's the unique thing about, or the nice thing about being played at location instead of 2D. 2D, it just plays full volume wherever you are. And we're going to save a reference. So this ref we have of our actor that spawned in the world, we're going to promote it to a variable and call it the draw sound ref. That way, when we stop drawing the bow, we can get that ref and convert to a validated get, so we can check if it's valid or not. And if it is valid, then we destroy it. Actually, we can just call stop. So stop just stops the sound, because I'm not sure if destroying it will also stop the sound, but anyway, it gets destroyed eventually after stop is called. And if we play again, then we just override the sound ref for the new one. All right, let's test this out. Very nice. All right. Right, next sound I want to add is a sound for when we fire the arrow. We want to add a whoosh sound for the arrow firing. And this is the whoosh sound, sounds like this. All right. And the whoosh sound is the sound of the arrow itself. So I'm going to play it in the BP arrow. Because again, maybe you have like a fire arrow and an ice arrow, they make different sounds. So it makes sense to add the sound here. So again, we're just going to do the same thing. Oh, first we create a queue out of it. So our arrow whoosh by create queue, queue arrow whoosh. And we're just going to also play sound, spawn. This one doesn't really matter if it's spawn or play because we're not going to need a reference to it. So I'm just going to say play sound at location so I can show you the difference, which is just, we don't have a reference. And again, the sound, I'm going to promote it to a variable, call it the whoosh sound. And we're going to set the default value to the whoosh queue. And the location is also the get actor location, so the location of the arrow. Now let's see how it sounds together with the arrow, the bow sound. Nice. Okay. Now it's starting to come together. All right, now let's move away from sounds a bit and create our first visual effect. So the VFX for the arrow trail. So when you fire an arrow, there's a trail behind it so you see visually where it goes. So I created a VFX folder here that has just this one material and its textures. This is a material that I got from the Paragon Sparrow character. That's a free asset on the Unreal Marketplace. And this material, I'm just going to be using it for the material that we'll be rendering for the visual effect itself. And I'll show you how. Disclaimer, I'm not good at VFX at all, so this is not going to be a complex effect at all, it's just going to be very basic. But for this case, we only need something very basic. So first thing we're going to do is right-click and create a Niagara system. And we're going to just say a new system from create an empty system. And we're going to call this the NS for Niagara system arrow trail. Open it up, and first thing we want to do is right-click and add an emitter, and choose the empty emitter. I noticed that if you right-click and say add empty emitter here, it's a bit different, so just add emitter and then choose the empty one. And the first thing we want to do is replace the sprite renderer here. So we're going to delete that and add a ribbon renderer because it's more of a ribbon. And then next thing is we want to, where is it? On the particle spawn, let's change the lifetime to 1. And the ribbon itself, so if you click on the ribbon we just added, we want to change the material to that material I just showed you, the arrow trail material from Paragon Sparrow. And then we want to add velocity to it. So on particle update, was it? No, on particle spawn. Yeah, on particle spawn, add velocity. It's going to tell you some things here, just say fix issue, and this will automatically add the solve forces and velocity. Oh, and also under the velocity, we want to change the Z value here to be 100, so it's a bit longer. And also on the particle spawn, there's a few things you can do. You can change the color, so you can say direct set, and maybe just make it a bit more transparent, yeah, something like that. And finally, under ribbon attributes, you can change the width, so change it to direct set, and the width can be something like 3 units to be a bit thinner. Oh, actually, we forgot one thing, which is the spawn rate. So under emitter update, I'm going to add a spawn rate. This is how often it spawns or refreshes. So this needs to be something like 50. If you don't have a spawn rate, I don't think it will work. Now let's take our trail and put it in the world to see what it looks like. this shouldn't happen. So it shouldn't be going up. Oh, I think I know what's the problem. When we added velocities, we automatically added this. So if I delete it, remember the fix issues. So when you add a velocity, it tells you need one of these things, either apply initial forces or solve forces and velocity. I clicked the wrong fix issue. We want apply initial forces. So I'm going to click this fix issue, which will add this apply initial forces. That way it doesn't have a default force going upwards. It takes the force of the movement. So now when we move it, yeah, perfect. And I can press G to show you without the widget. Very nice. Okay, I'm going to delete that now, and we want to spawn it on the arrow itself. So on our BP arrow, we want to spawn it somewhere in the on the tip of the arrow. So I'm going to add another component on the arrow mesh here called a scene component. This is just a component that I can use to get its location on the arrow. So I'm just going to call it the particle spawn, or let's say the trail effect location. And I'm going to move it somewhere like here. And then in our event graph, in the fire event, we want to spawn this. So spawn system attached. We're going to attach it. By the way, spawn emitter is for the legacy particle system, and spawn system is for the Niagara system. So we have a Niagara effect. We're going to do spawn system, and the template that we're going to use is the arrow trail, but I'm also going to promote that to a variable so that each arrow can define its own trail effect. And we're just going to call it trail effect, and the default value will be our Niagara system we just created. And the attach to component, we're going to attach it to the scene component that we just created. Yeah, I think that is it. Let's see how this looks like. All right, drawing the bow. Ooh, very nice. We have the whoosh sound, we have the the draw sound, and the trail effect. Now, if you don't like that the trail effect stays a bit before following the arrow, you can change that by changing the lifetime that we set to 1 second. You can decrease that. Right now, next thing I want to do is the widget that we have here to aim. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't tell you how far you've aimed. I want it to be a bit more dynamic. So I'm going to have it move towards the center as we continuously draw the bow. So opening up our content folder, going to our Crosshair widget. So this circle, I'm going to have it keep getting smaller and smaller until we reach the full draw time. That means it's only going to be a dot. And then we're going to animate the dot as well. Now to do that, we need to know two things. We need to know what is the maximum draw duration, and we also need to know how long we've been drawing the bow. And we have both of these variables in our AC bow mechanics here. The draw time and the max draw time that we can get from our bow ref. So what we're going to do is we're going to dispatch an event every time this timer is called, and then we're going to listen to that event in the Crosshair widget. So just like we have on aim end and on aim begin, we're going to have another function, call it on draw increment or something, or on draw ongoing. And we're going to add two inputs first before calling it. We're going to add two inputs to this event dispatcher. One is the max draw time, which is going to be a float. And another one is the current draw time, which is also a float. And then we're going to call this function right here after we update the draw time. And we're just going to pass the draw time, and we are going to get the max draw time of our current bow. Remember, the max draw time is set on the bow because each bow can have a different maximum draw time. All right, and now in our Crosshair widget, we go back to the event graph. I don't need the tick, I don't need the pre-construct, and on construct, we're going to listen to this event or bind to the dispatched event. And to bind to it, we need a reference to the AC bow mechanics. So we're gonna say get owning player pawn, because we know that the AC bow mechanic is applied to pawns, and then we're going to get component by class. So we're going to search for the AC bow mechanics component. And if it is valid, make sure to use the valid macro to check if it's valid or not, because if someone spawns the widget and they don't have the AC bow mechanics, then we can't get these values. So we're not going to do anything. But if it is valid, then we're going to get our AC bow mechanics and say assign on draw ongoing. This is the event we just created. And here we're going to say something like resize outer circle, something like that. All right, we're going to do some things here, but what we want is this outer circle. We want to change its scale by the factor of the max draw time divided by the draw time. So what's the percentage of the full draw time have we reached? So to do that, there is a function. So by the way, the outer circle here is a variable because we clicked the is variable checkbox. If you don't have that clicked, make sure to click it so that it appears for you here in the variables. So the outer circle has a function called set render scale. And this, you can give it a value between 0 and 1, where 1 is the full scale and 0 is invisible. And this scale, we want it, well, let's split it because we want both the values separately. So when we are at full scale, when we're at full draw, we want the scale to be 0, and when we are not drawing at all, we want the scale to be 1. So we're going to get our draw time and divide it by our max draw time. And then we're going to clamp this value. So use clamp float. Clamp just limits it between these two values. So we're going to clamp it between 0 and 1 to make sure it never exceeds 1, because we keep incrementing draw time even after it increases past the max. So we just want to make sure it's always between 0 and 1. And then we're not going to plug these values in right away. We want to subtract 1 minus this value. So we're going to do a subtract 1 minus this value. The reason is because, remember, we're inverting it. So when it's full draw, this will be 0. So then we want to do 1 minus. And then plug both of these values here. I did not compile something. Yes, I did not compile this. All right. One more thing we have to do, but let me just show you this first. Now, when I play, yes, you see the circle is going back. But when I shoot the arrow, it doesn't go back again until I press the draw button or the fire arrow again. That is because we don't reset it when the draw ends. So we have an event for on draw end that we're going to listen to again. Assign on draw end. We don't have that. Well, then we should create it. So we have an event on draw end, and let's call it here. Call the on draw end event dispatcher. And now we can listen to it. So assign on draw end. And here we want to reset the render scale back to its original value of 1. Okay, let's see. And as soon as we fire the bow, it goes back because we call draw end when we call fire, FYI. Great. Now there's a couple more things I want to do. When we reach the end, we want to play a sound to tell the player that this is the maximum draw time. And we also want to animate that circle in the middle to give a little more visual flair. So back in our designer tab here, let me show you how to create animations inside your widget. So I'm going to click on this dot here and then go to the animations tab. And then I'm going to add an animation and call it pulse, because we're going to pulse this dot. And then we're going to add a track for the dot itself. This is what we want to animate. And then you can click the plus here to animate certain attributes of this. So we want to animate the color, and we want to animate the transform. So the color, because we want to change its color to something else, so it pops, and the transform because we want to make it grow big and then small again. And the animation duration, I want it pretty quick, so something like 0.5 seconds. But I want it to pulse at the middle and then go back to its regular size at 0.5. So I'm going to stop my timer here at 0.25, which is right in the middle, and then I'm going to change the values. So to make this blue, oh, I lost it. So to make this blue, I'm going to change this to something like 0, 1, 0.8, yeah, something like that. And the, oh, I should do that at 0.25, not here. So let me undo these changes. Okay, so at 0.25, I'm going to make this 0, 1, 0.81. So you can see when I move this, now the color changes. Here it's the default, and here it's this new color. And the transform, I'm going to make it grow. So on scale, I'm going to make it grow like 2.5 times. So 2.5 on the X, 2.5 on the Y. So then it grows and becomes blue. And then at 0.5, I just want to reset these values. So back to 1, 1, 1, and this is back to 1 and 1. All right, so now if we play the animation, it looks like this. Perfect. So now we created an animation, but we're not playing it yet. So how do we play it? Back in our event graph. Here, we want to play it when we reach the maximum. So we're going to create a branch and check when this value is equal to 1, because 1 is the max since we clamp it at 1. So as soon as this value reaches 1, that means we've reached the max draw time. Then I'm going to play this animation, but I'm only going to do it once. Remember, this is going to keep being called every time we call the event dispatcher, and the event dispatcher is called continuously while the button is pressed. So I'm going to do a do once node to make sure we only do this once. And then I'm going to say play animation. And the animation is I need to compile, and the animation should be the pulse. Yeah, so I have a reference to it here. All right, and I also want to play a sound. So I have this sound here that sounds like this. Just a click sound to make sure that the player knows something has happened. So I'm going to play sound 2D. This is a UI sound, so you usually play UI sounds 2D because you don't care where it is in the world. And I'm just going to create this, I'm just going to assign this draw full. I can also create a queue from it, queue underscore draw full. I really should get my naming patterns consistent. It doesn't matter. All right, so now let's see. Nice. So the second time it's not happening because we do a do once here. So we need to reset this do once when something happens. So if this value is false, just reset it. That's the simplest thing to do. So if we reach the end, call it do once. Otherwise, if the value is anything other than 1, that means we start again, then reset it. So now you can do it multiple times. Perfect. All right, now the thing that will bring this all together and it will feel like an actual arrow is the impact effect. So we want the bow itself to be able to hit stuff and also make a sound and an effect when it hits things, because right now it just goes through everything. And there are a few ways we can do this. So first, let's go to our BP arrow. First thing is we have this collision box, and this is what we want to be colliding with things. Now the collision box is now set to overlap all dynamic, which means it's going to overlap everything and not block it. Now if I change it to block all dynamic, this is not the way we're going to go, but I'm just going to show you what happens if we change it to block all dynamic. Well, first it's going to hit me or the bow. Oh, and now it's pushing me away. And also if it hits something, it's colliding with me. So I can make it ignore certain things. So I can say custom and ignore the pawn so it doesn't collide with the pawn. Again, we're not going to continue to do that, but I'm just showing you. So as soon as it hits something, it stops. But it stops in a weird position. And also, it's usually not what you want with an arrow, because sometimes you want it to go through certain actors and not through others. Let's say you have friendly players with you and you want to be able to shoot through them, you don't want it to hit them, then you can't do that with onHit. Because you can't say hit certain pawns but not other pawns, because if you ignore the pawn channel, then it ignores all pawns. So the way that it's usually done, I'm going to revert this, we keep it as overlap all dynamic. And we check when we overlap something, is this something that we should be we can hit or not? And if it is something that we can hit, then we stop it and attach it to that thing. Let me show you how. So back in our event graph, we're going to click on our collision box and scroll down to on component begin overlap. So this is the event that's called when this collision box overlaps with something. First, let's check if the projectile component that we add here, we didn't create a reference to it. We need to create a reference to this projectile movement component. So I'm just going to pull this back a bit and promote this to a variable. Call it the projectile movement component. And the reason why we need this to be a variable is because we need to stop it, because this is what controls the movement of the projectile. So we're going to get it and convert it to a validated get, because we need to make sure it's valid first. And if it is valid, we're just going to destroy this component by calling destroy component. And if it's not valid, we'll continue. But now we destroyed the component, so the arrow will stop moving. Now we want to attach the arrow to whatever it hit. So we need to get our sweep result and say break. This is the same as a hit result from a line trace and gives us all the information about what we just overlapped with. So we're going to say get our, we're going to say attach actor to component. Oh, and we also want to disable collision. Let's disable collision first. So we get our collision box, because once it collides once, we want it to stop. So we get our collision box and say set collision enabled to no collision. So now we don't have any more collision, and we attach it. And the parent has to be a component. So we get the hit component that we just hit, basically. And also there are still a few more things we need to do, but let me show you what this looks like initially. All right, so now if it overlaps something, it just goes through it. One more very important thing you need to know is with overlap events, they aren't triggered by default. So let me choose these cubes, for example, and then in their details, I'm going to search for overlap. And you have to check this generate overlap events with anything you want the arrow to be able to overlap with. So I'm going to do it for these cubes, and I'm also going to do it for pretty much everything here. So overlap events, and also all of these overlap events, and these as well. So now we can pretty much hit everything. I did it for the walls, and I think just these cylinders are left. Okay, so now we can basically overlap with everything. Now let's see. Great. So you see where it went pretty much inside the cube. And this also went inside the wall. And this is because when we attach it, we don't change, we don't change the location rule. So this one we need to say keep world. So attach to whatever you just hit, but make sure to keep the arrow at its location, the location it was at when it hit something. Well, okay, so now you can see that it looks a lot better. I'm gonna hit this cube. Nice. So now it stays in the place it was when it first did the overlap. Now, one more thing is right now, when I'm moving, I'm still generating overlap effects. So even before I shoot it, I can also print to show you. So I'm gonna print hello here. And you can see it's already printing hello. It's overlapped with me already. And it's overlapped again here. So it keeps generating overlap events even though it's not firing. The reason it's not attaching to the things is because it's already attached to me. So we need to make sure that we only enable collision when we fire the arrow. So let's say by default when we spawn, so on begin play, I'm going to make sure that the set collision enabled is no collision. So by default, we don't have collision. And then when we fire arrow, let's do it somewhere here. We're going to also copy these and set collision back to query and physics. Yeah. All right, so now let me actually bring the print statement back. So now when now it's not printing anything, and when the arrow overlaps with something, it's not printing either. And only when it fires, then, oh, it's, that's also another thing we have to fix, that it can overlap with me. We don't want that. So let's fix that before anything else. So this is something you'll find yourself doing often, which is checking what you've overlapped with and whether it's something that you're allowed to hit or not. For now, I'm just going to say you can hit everything other than the person that fired you. So how do I get a reference to the person that fired you? Oh, and by the way, the is not valid should still continue. I'm going to do a branch, and I'm going to check if the other actor that we just hit is equal to the instigator. So the instigator is the person that spawned this actor, which is our player. So if the person spawning it is the same person it's overlapping with, then don't do anything. Otherwise, you can keep going. So now it shouldn't overlap with me, and it should overlap with everything else. Oops, I did something. I did the opposite. This not is equal should be is not equal. Or you do it on false, but yeah, let's check not equal. Not equal to instigator, then you can continue. That's weird. I wonder what it's overlapping with. Is it me or the bow? Seems like it's me. So let's print here the instigator. Not printing. So instigator is not valid. Maybe we don't have an instigator set in our AC bow mechanics. So when we spawn the arrow here, we don't set an instigator. So the instigator should be the pawn that spawned this arrow. So I'm going to get my character ref and set that to be the instigator. Okay, now it should work. Let's see. Fires, yeah, ignores me, very nice. And it's saying that the instigator is the player character correctly. Very nice, does it, excellent. So we can remove this print statement. All right, now let's also play a sound when we hit something. So here we're gonna say play sound at location. We don't need to spawn sound because I don't think we need to destroy it at any point. And the location is the get actor location. You can also use the hit location, but they're going to be the same. And the sound, let's promote that to a variable and call it the impact sound. And let's create a cue out of the sound that I have here. So I have this impact sound. I'm going to right click, create cue, and call it cue arrow impact. Now you should have different sounds for different materials, one for hitting glass, wood, whatever, but yeah, for this tutorial I'm just gonna have one sound. Impact. All right, let's see how this sounds. Very nice. And the further away, the lower the volume should be. But I don't know if we set the, it's called the attenuation range, but I'm not sure if we set it. And also, you kind of don't want the arrows to keep sticking around the whole time. Maybe you want them to disappear after a while. And you can also play around with the location. You can maybe move it forward a bit if you want it to stick further into the material. Yeah, you can play around with these values. To make it disappear after a while, you can easily, after firing the arrow at the very end, you can say set lifetime, a lifespan. So from now on, make the lifespan, I don't know, 5 seconds. So after firing, it will last 5 seconds and then it should disappear. Maybe you want it a bit longer than 5 seconds in case you're, I don't know, shooting something very far away. Now 5 seconds, it's going to disappear. Yeah, so it disappeared before it landed. Maybe you want it like 10 seconds, yeah, as you wish. All right, now I want to add something also really cool, which is adding physics collisions when it hits something that simulates physics. So these boxes, they simulate physics, so I can push them like this. So I want also when the arrow hits it, I want it to push the box. Oh, and also you notice a trail effect stays after it hits something. We want to disable that as well. So let's do both of these things. Let's add the physics collision first. So after we hit something, we need to check first if that something simulates physics or not. So we can get the hit component. I'm not sure, is it the actor or the component? Oh, yeah, it's the component that simulates physics. And check, is simulating physics. And if it is, let me just collapse this. All right, and if it is simulating physics, we're going to add an impulse to it. So call add impulse. No, we need to add impulse on this thing. Let me make a reroute node here and call add impulse. And the value of the impulse should be the velocity of the bow. How fast was it going and what direction was it going? Now we have a velocity, but we never stored it as a variable. So this velocity here is on the projectile movement component, which we destroyed. So let's just promote it to a variable. Promote to variable and call it the, let's just call it velocity. Alrighty, and here we can just get this velocity variable and plug it in here. And let's do a delay of like 1 second and then destroy the trail effect because we want the trail effect to just last for a bit because we see it still for 1 second in our line of sight and then we want to destroy it. But we need to get a reference to the trail effect, which we didn't create a variable from here. So this is our trail effect. I'm going to promote that to a variable, trail effect ref. And then check if it is valid by converting to a validated get. And if it is valid, destroy it. And also here, if we're not simulating physics, just ignore the impulse and continue to the delay. Great, let's see what this looks like. And I'm gonna hit that cube, and it did nothing. Why didn't it do anything? Well, the trail effect is gone, so that's good. Let's print what we hit here. What did we hit? We hit a cube. And is the cube simulating physics? Let's move our print over here. It printed, so it said true. So maybe our velocity is wrong. Let's print our velocity. Nope, we have a velocity. So, oh, we should check this box, velocity change. There we go. All right, some little live debugging. Very nice. And if we hit something that doesn't simulate physics, of course nothing happens. You don't expect the ground to move when you hit it. Very nice. Right now let's remove this print string. We don't need it anymore. And now finally, let's spawn our impact effect when we hit something. Now I can't create this on my own, that's a bit complicated, but I have this impact effect from the Realistic Starter VFX pack, which is free on the Unreal Marketplace. And it looks something like this. Let me put it in the world. So this is an effect when we hit wood. Again, obviously, if you want it to be super realistic, you'd want an effect when you hit pretty much different materials. But this is what it looks like. All right, so now we want to spawn it somewhere, let's say here after we play the sound. Oh, I don't need this. So yeah, let me move all of these. Let's keep these, okay. So now here, now we're gonna spawn emitter and not spawn system because this is the legacy particle effect. Let me move these also here, okay. And we're gonna plug this in, and the location is going to be the hit location. So wherever the location is here, that is the location we're gonna use. And I'm also gonna promote this to a variable and call it the impact effect. Again, so you can customize it per arrow type. And I'm just gonna default it to this wood destruction. And really that's all. Now let's see how this looks. Very nice. And awesome. All right, before we end, there's one very important quality of life improvement I want to add, and that's something similar to input buffering. What that means is when I fire the bow now, while the arrow is firing, if I click to hold, so right now I'm clicking, but the bow is not being drawn because I didn't click in time, I clicked too early. So I fire the bow and I click while it's still in the air to draw again. The input doesn't register because I can't fire while the arrow is already firing. But we want the input to still register, and when it's time or when I'm able to fire the arrow again, we want it to queue up that action for us. This you'll find in almost every game because otherwise the player has to be really good at timing their actions and it just feels weird. So it's pretty simple. Let's see how we're going to do that. So over here, when in our AC bow mechanics, in our actor component, where we draw the bow, if we detect that we can't draw the bow for any reason, and the reasons here are if we're not drawing, if we're not aiming, or if we're firing, and so on. So if we detect that we can't draw the bow, but we're still inputting the action, we're going to create a new variable, call it is waiting to draw bow. And we're going to set this variable here to true. So we are waiting to draw the bow, but for any number of reasons we can't. And also when we can, so over here on the yes, we're going to duplicate this variable and set it back to false. Because now we can, so we're not waiting anymore. We also want to set it to false when we stop holding the input, when we stop drawing the bow. So I'm going to move that maybe somewhere here. We set it back to false. Okay, so now we set the variable where we want it, but we have to use it first. And that's going to be in the fire arrow end. So when we finish firing an arrow, this is when we're allowed to start aiming again and when we're allowed to draw the bow again. So here we're going to do a branch and check. Are we waiting to draw bow? So if this variable is true, that means we are waiting to draw bow, then just call draw begin for us. Perfect. So let's test this out. Now I'm going to fire the arrow, and as soon as it fires, I'm going to click again immediately. And I'm clicking, and nice. It works. So it buffers the action for me so that when it's time for the action to be done, it automatically does it and I don't have to click again. Excellent. And that's it for this part. And the next part, I have two very cool things for you. First, we're going to attach a camera to the arrow so that we can switch to this camera and watch the arrow fly in the air, also sometimes referred to as kill cam. And we're going to then migrate the entire bow and arrow series into my other Smart Enemy AI series to show you how to reuse the actor component and all its dependencies in a completely new project and how to configure it. So I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please consider giving a like and subscribe. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.